Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really happy to have with me once again Jeff Berwick. Jeff really has a storied past. He made a lot of money in the dot-com bubble and then saw a good part of it, if not most of it, disappear almost out of thin air. Jeff then took a year or so off to travel around the world and to reflect on what happened and what life is really all about. And he really began questioning how the market could appear to be so strong at one point in time and then worth so little moments later. I mean, it was just almost those of us who lived through that period of time remember how cataclysmic and how suddenly wealth, or what we thought was wealth, just simply disappeared. Well, Jeff discovered that Austrian economics had the answers, or at least most of them, or many of the answers to his questions back then. But alas, the people running our country, or any country for that matter, unfortunately think and act more like parasites than concerned citizens. They seek to empower and enrich themselves at the expense of the masses. And Jeff is quick to point out that these people, like those who set up the Federal Reserve Bank and who orchestrated the past two world wars and continue to orchestrate wars, are continuing to engage in all manner of diabolical behavior that is now threatening to take all of us, what is left at least of our liberties, take all of our liberties away from us. The liberties that our founding fathers thought they were giving us. Jeff may have an idea that perhaps the idea of any government is probably not going to work out too well, but at least I believe the founding fathers had the intention and understood that a powerful government takes away the liberties of people. Well, Jeff and some other truth seekers will be traveling to the next Bilderberg conference in Germany to do what they can to expose the evil these rich and powerful tycoons are perpetrating on the masses of humanity. He will be going over there to Germany the next few weeks, and so I really wanted to talk to him before he leaves to get his insights in front of you before that time period. Specifically, I want to talk to Jeff about two articles that he's recently written that really caught my eye. The first is about the sudden rise in the price of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a topic that Jeff knows a whole lot about, and we've seen a tremendous move, some 25% over the last week, in fact, for Bitcoin. So I want to ask Jeff about that. And the second article that he wrote about recently that I really want to talk to him about is titled Billionaire Gross, Jubilee Debt Relief as Prelude to New Global Economic Order. So these are two, I think, very important issues, very important topics. Before we get started, let me tell you that you should go to dollarvigilante.com, dollarvigilante.com, to avail yourself to a steady diet of truthful and I would say very fascinating articles, excuse me, as Jeff seeks the truth. He really is a truth seeker, and that's one of the things I really love about him. So, Jeff, I'm really glad you could be with us today.
Thank you, Jay. Always a pleasure to be on with you.
Always fun to have you, and enjoyable to have you. Not just fun, but enjoyable. As you point out in your article on Bitcoin has risen by more than 25% in just the last week, I think from $430 to $545 or something like that. And I saw an article in Zero Hedge recently suggesting that this rise was due to Chinese people seeking to get their wealth out of China, as the People's Bank of China is once again in the process of a fairly aggressive devaluation of the yuan. Does that sound right to you?
It definitely could be. It's, of course, impossible to tell in any market exactly what's driving things, but
sure.
Definitely in the last week, something has changed. Bitcoin was very steady around $430 to $450 for months, which is fairly unusual for Bitcoin, although it has become more and more normal. It's become less volatile over time, as I said it would, as it becomes more and more used. But then in the last week, it's just been gap up after gap up every single day of the week, and it's up 25% now, as you pointed out. It was around $430 just a week ago, about 8 days ago, and now it just went over $545. I think it's down a little bit now. So something has definitely happened. I've been saying actually since last summer that there's so many reasons why Bitcoin will go up. You can't just pick any one of them. Bitcoin's acceptance has just grown dramatically. I've been in Bitcoin since 2011 at $3, and I told our subscribers to get into it then. And for a few years, it was pretty quiet. A few people knew about it. There was a few exchanges where you could kind of trade it. Last year, in 2015, more than $1 billion was invested into Bitcoin and blockchain-related companies just last year alone. That's a massive amount, and it's not just small companies investing. It's companies like NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and all kinds of very large investors, because they're starting to wake up and realize that Bitcoin is changing the game. It will change the game. It already has changed the game, and they need to catch up. It's very similar to how the internet was in 1994. I remember that. I was around for that. And I was telling people this is going to change the world. Everyone thought I was crazy. And then by a few years later, by 1997, 1998, billions of dollars were being put into these internet companies. And you mentioned earlier how a lot of that was lost a few years later because of these bubbles that are created by the central banks. But we all know now the internet has become a massive part of everyone's lives. It's changed the world, and no one can dispute that. And I think Bitcoin is in the process of doing that as well. Bitcoin is the most important thing to happen since the internet, in my opinion, because it changes the world of money and banking. It has the potential to get rid of, to totally make obsolete central banks and the banks that we have today, and even governments. So that's why I like it so much. So there's any number of reasons it could have gone up. Definitely China could be one. China has very hard capital controls. Many Chinese have been making a lot of money because they've allowed a little bit of freedom over the last decade or two there, which has resulted in massive cities being built in days, really. That's what happens when freedom happens. When you let the market happen, people make incredible amounts of wealth, and that's what's happened in China. But the Chinese government doesn't let you take that wealth outside of the country unless you know somebody and pay off somebody in the government, just like everywhere else, essentially. And so many Chinese, being quite smart, Chinese in general, are quite entrepreneurial and smart, have gravitated towards Bitcoin, realizing that's one way that they can get their wealth outside of the system.
Very interesting. Well, Jeff, I know in your article that you wrote going back here a couple of days ago, you talked about three main reasons, I guess, three major reasons why you thought Bitcoin and blockchain are really looking very, very positive. First of all, explain to us blockchain. What is that, and how does that differ from Bitcoin?
Sure. They're very tied together. You can't have Bitcoin without the blockchain. So for people who don't know what it is, essentially Bitcoin is based on something called the blockchain. And the blockchain is essentially an accounting system that essentially knows exactly where every single Bitcoin in the world is. It's all accounted for. So you can actually see every single transaction since the beginning of Bitcoin. You can see that. And for that reason, some people don't like Bitcoin. They say, oh, it's too easy for the government to track. And that's a whole other topic that we can go into, how you can quite easily hide what you're doing. But every single transaction is actually tracked, and that's on something called the blockchain. And that blockchain is not on one set of servers. So it's not like Amazon.com or something else like that, where it's all on their servers. It's actually on thousands and thousands of computers around the world, which is every Bitcoin miner and everyone who has Bitcoin on their computer is actually part of the blockchain. They actually hold the information on the blockchain. So that's why Bitcoin can't be shut down, or the blockchain can't be shut down, unless they turn off the internet or turn off the power. And that's actually something governments are considering now with things like the internet kill switch, because it's getting too out of control. There's too much freedom happening thanks to the internet. And John Kerry said this little thing called the internet is making it hard to govern. So they are actually considering that. But unless they do, and until they do, you cannot shut down Bitcoin. There is no Bitcoin office. There's no Bitcoin CEO. The blockchain doesn't exist anywhere. This is the beautiful thing. And if you think about it, Jay, 15 years ago, all these companies didn't even exist. So Bitcoin didn't exist. Now, where is Bitcoin? It's nowhere, really. The biggest hotel company in the world is Airbnb. Where are they? They own no hotels. The biggest taxi company in the world is Uber. They own no taxis. This is the revolution that's going on. And now it's going to the next level, which is decentralized, which is all essentially what you could call blockchain technology, a way of making it so that this information is not in one place, so it can't be shut down by anyone. And so that's what actually makes Bitcoin operate. And that's actually behind every cryptocurrency, except for the government-created cryptocurrencies, which they're trying to create now. But every other cryptocurrency is based on something which is similar to blockchain, which can't be shut down. And that's what makes it so exciting. There is no point of failure. There is no way one government can tax or regulate or shut it down or arrest the CEO. There is no CEO. There is no Bitcoin office. And so that's what's so exciting about the entire Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrency space.
Well, it really is fascinating. I want to ask you a little bit about the potential for the establishment to gain control of it, and you're suggesting that's not possible, but you're also suggesting they're trying to set up their own cryptocurrency system, which would allow them then to control things. But before I ask you, well, let's just go into that now. So I think and then I want to ask you a little bit more about some of the big picture reasons why economic reasons why you believe that Bitcoin, its future is very bright going ahead. But let's talk a little bit about, I think Goldman Sachs is sort of championing Bitcoin in a way, and I get very, very leery of Goldman Sachs championing anything. It seems to me kind of frightening. But do you see is there some potential? Would they try to shut down the internet or shut down the system, as you say, and then reestablish their own so that they have control of it? Is that what might be what they may be planning to do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting to the point now where they're starting to lose control, and Bitcoin, like I said, could make central banks obsolete. And once you make central banks obsolete, you essentially make governments nearly obsolete. Governments really can't exist without these central banks today. They can't exist in their current form anyway. You can't have any wars without central banks because they print the money. The hidden tax of inflation is how all these things are funded. So they're very, very concerned. It took them a few years. I was waiting for them to realize that this is going to take them down. And it was around 2011 they didn't seem to realize it. 2012, not so much. 13, they started to realize, and they said they're going to regulate it. And then they realized, wait, you can't really regulate it. It doesn't really exist anywhere. So now that the latest thing is they're trying to invest in lots of different companies and try to take over the space. But they still don't realize you can't actually control Bitcoin. So no, there is no risk that they can really take over Bitcoin. It's not possible, really. There is certain ways that it can kind of be manipulated. For sure, you can always manipulate things. But even if, for example, here's one scenario. Let's say the Federal Reserve and the people who run it, not Janet Yellen, she's just a teleprompter reader like Barack Obama, of course, but the people who run it, they say, okay, we want to take out Bitcoin any way we can. Let's buy up every Bitcoin in the world so that we can just get rid of it somehow. So they do that, right? Because they have a money printing machine, so they can print up trillions of dollars. So why not buy every Bitcoin? So if the Federal Reserve were to do that, so they print up, let's say they start with $1 trillion. The current market cap of Bitcoin's in the billions. It's like 20 billion or something around that level right now. So let's say they print up $1 trillion with the intention to buy all the Bitcoins. As soon as they started to buy a few $1 billion worth of Bitcoins, the Bitcoin price would go up hundreds of percent. And then people would start to realize what's going on. They'd start to try to buy more. I'd make Bitcoin go up thousands of percent. Then more people would start buying Bitcoin, as you know, Jay, with the stock market, and everyone gets excited when things are going up.
Right.
Before you know it, Bitcoin would be well over $1 million of Bitcoin, and there'd still be a lot of people who wouldn't sell because a lot of the people who really love Bitcoin, including myself, we love it way beyond any monetary value. We love it because it makes humanity more free, and it's actually a more solid form of money. So many of us would never sell, but even if let's say they may move it to $10 million or $100 million of Bitcoin, I might sell at that point, and then we might just move to another cryptocurrency. We just go, okay, we're all trillionaires now. We're not going to use Bitcoin anymore because they own it all. Let's use Ethereum or Litecoin or any of the thousands of other cryptocurrencies out there. So they can't control it no matter what they do, unless, like we said, they turn off the power of the internet, which is something they're very seriously considering.
I want to ask you about your plan to travel here to Germany next week to visit or to try to get as close as possible to the Bilderberg people, because these would be the people that would be secretly planning. They have these meetings that they don't allow anybody anywhere near, and the people that are there, some of the large household name people, presidents and central bankers, and also people that we know, anchors to the major media, are sworn to secrecy, are not allowed to talk about anything that goes on there. I want to ask you about that, but let's get back to this issue of what are the major reasons. You offered three major reasons and then a fourth that was a very interesting one. Why you think that Bitcoin, why you're so bullish on Bitcoin. There are three major trends that you pointed out in your article, and I would suggest that people should go to your website and read those articles. But talk to us about those three major trends.
Sure, absolutely. These are trends that I said a year ago were why I think Bitcoin will definitely rise over the future. The first one is that Bitcoin and blockchain are the future of money and banking. We already talked about that, about how this is really a revolution. So the second one is capital control crackdowns, bank bail-ins, and worldwide taxation schemes will drive Bitcoin growth. That's actually related to the Chinese issue. This is something I pointed out. Of course, we've been following things like FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act in the U.S., which has made it almost impossible for Americans to get their money outside of the U.S. It's getting very difficult. It's actually a form of nefarious capital controls. They're putting those into place all around the place, and even the Panama Papers that recently recently were put out, those were put out by the CIA with the intention to try to shut down anyone doing any sort of banking in offshore jurisdictions. So we've been expecting this. We've known this is coming. And so I've said in the past that as this happens more and more, people will start to wake up and they'll start to realize, like the Chinese, I better get some of my assets into Bitcoin where they can't confiscate it or seize it or control it or put capital controls on it. So that's another major shift going on in the world, and I expect that to continue. And as it continues, people will gravitate to things like cryptocurrencies. And then the third big reason was the coming debt jubilee will obviously create a massive amount of craziness and crisis. And of course, so many people have been coming out now. George Soros, Carl Icahn, Jim Rogers, Stanley Druckenmiller, and just Alan Greenspan just yesterday all come out and said that we're on the verge of a massive biblical level collapse crisis. And I agree with them. And actually, some of them are actually involved in planning it, including Soros, so they would know. We're on the verge of a massive crisis. This is being admitted to by all those people and many others, including myself. I was one of the first to really be outspoken about it last summer, and we almost had the major crash last summer in August when the Dow was down more than 1,000 points. In the third quarter of last year was the biggest drop in worldwide stock market since 2008, since the last crisis. So we already began, in my opinion. And as that continues, of course, we're going to see currencies collapse. We're going to see banks collapse. We're going to see countries collapse. This is something that even William White of the Bank of International Settlements, he said this a few months ago. He said, this is a debt jubilee. And he actually said this has been going on for 5,000 years, since the Sumerians. There's a lot of very biblical, very occult things about this, but all the elites know about it. Even Christine Lagarde did her speech on the magic number 7. It's all tied to the number 7, which is something to do with the Shemitah. And this year is actually called the Jubilee, which is supposed to be a year where you wash away all debts. But they don't intend to necessarily wash away debts. They intend to collapse the entire system of debt and then create a new monetary new world order. So as that happens, of course, we're going to see currencies collapse. The yen, it was actually, who was it? It came out just 2 days ago. Bill Gross. Bill Gross, yeah. PIMCO came out and said Japan has to basically renege on their debt. They have to go through a bankruptcy. I've agreed with that. I've agreed with that for a couple of years. And now he's saying it. Japan will probably be one of the first to fall. So we could see the yen just wiped off the map in the next couple of months. We could see the euro wiped off the map. The Eurozone is so on the brink. Everyone's saying it, but no one's really saying it with conviction like this will happen for sure. But this is going to happen for sure. The Eurozone's going to collapse. The euro might not even exist a few years from now or even a few months from now. So as that happens, of course, the price of Bitcoin is going to rise dramatically. Now, what level it goes to, who knows? If the U.S. dollar goes to zero, which it could in the next couple of years, this is what we're talking about here, then Bitcoin would be worth $1 trillion, but $1 million wouldn't buy you a Big Mac at McDonald's. So we're in crazy times here right now, but that's one of the main reasons why I also think Bitcoin will do very well.
What about gold then, Jeff? What about gold and silver? And another, we've had on this show, we've had the CEO, the COO of Gold Money, which is now BitGold. BitGold, Gold Money, and BitGold merged, as I'm sure you're aware. What are your thoughts about that? It's an out of the banking system. It's outside of the banking system, which we all know, as you've just talked about, it's in big trouble. But the whole global economy is in big trouble. Why not have something like a BitGold that has actual gold attached to it?
Oh, absolutely. Everything I just said about Bitcoin applies to gold and silver. I'm just as bullish on gold and silver as I am on Bitcoin for the exact same reasons. In fact, Bitcoin was sort of modeled after gold and silver. That's why you have to mine Bitcoin. It was essentially a way of making a digital gold and silver, which is very interesting because we live in very digital times, so it makes a lot of sense. But absolutely, at the Dollar Vigilante, we actually recommend the great majority of your assets be in precious metals, not in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's too new and speculative. Unless you're a risk taker, I wouldn't put more than 5 or 10% of your net worth into Bitcoin. It could go to zero. Who knows? It's only 7 years old now, but it also could go to $1 million. So it's that kind of risk and reward. Whereas gold and silver are not anywhere near that kind of risk and reward. It won't have the reward on the upside. Gold won't go to $1 million an ounce, I don't think, unless the dollar goes to zero. But Bitcoin really could. In real terms, it actually could. but gold won't go to zero either. And gold and silver are monetary metals that have been throughout human history. Even children know, you just get them a gold or silver coin and their eyes light up. There's something about it. It's something ingrained in our DNA, or perhaps some sort of, maybe from God. It's God's money. I don't really know exactly. I leave that up to you guys to decide. But I just know it has value, and it's actually been the best way to survive these sort of crises throughout human history. And if you look at what everyone else is doing, including all those people I just named, including George Soros and Jim Rogers and Stanley Druckenmiller, they're all buying gold right now. So I agree with that. Gold and silver will have the same reason for doing incredibly well over the coming years as this crisis continues as Bitcoin. And as far as digital sort of things like BitGold and having gold in different countries, I think that's very important. It's not like the U.S., the land of the free, didn't confiscate gold in 1933. They did during the last time they went through a fairly major crisis like this. So to keep all your precious metals in one country is putting a lot of political risk on yourself. You should internationalize and diversify your precious metals, and it's actually never been easier than today. You brought up gold money and BitGold. James Turk is a good mutual friend of both of ours from Gold Money, and they have vaults in Singapore and London and all over the place, Dubai. So you can very easily from your own home just wire some money to Gold Money, and I'm not saying just Gold Money. I would actually diversify amongst all those. There's so much risk involved with all these things that it was actually Richard Russell who passed away recently of the Dow Theory Letters. Just amazing. He actually started the financial newsletter business, really. He said just a year or two ago that the person who loses the least in this coming collapse is going to win. And that's, I think, generally the case. I don't think we should be looking to become very wealthy during this collapse, although it is very possible if you're very smart, you could. But really, it's just trying to hang on to what you have. This is going to wipe out almost everybody in this collapse.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to agree with you on that. Well, certainly, one of the issues, though, that troubles me a little bit about BitGold is the fact that it is so establishment, it seems. The Soros brothers, for example, are big investors in it. The large investment houses of Canada are all big investors. They have deep pockets. They have no problem raising money. But then on the other hand, perhaps what it's telling us is the establishment is preparing and getting ready themselves to protect themselves, because they know that the very system that they've been involved in setting up is on the verge of collapse. And so they're probably, it might make some sense to pay some attention to what these folks are doing. As you mentioned, Druckenmiller and Rogers and Soros and these fellows. Bill Gross, for goodness sakes. I mean, as you point out, and I would suggest to my listeners, again, go to A Dollar Vigilante and read the article that Jeff wrote about Bill Gross and the Jubilee. A very fascinating article, but again, a sinister side there. Of course, it's not as if these landlords of the world are going to say, "Oh, we're sorry about all that, and we're going to make amends to you. We're going to make sure that the world is that all you people who've been hurt badly by our system are going to be taken care of." And I don't think they're really saying that, are they, Jeff?
No, absolutely not. They're going to make it way worse. They have it's really crazy, their plan. They essentially want to create a one world government.
Right.
You can see that's been put in place now for decades. That's just obvious. If people can't, if they've looked into it and they don't see that it's happening, they're not looking very hard. That's just obvious. They actually say it very outspokenly. And it was actually Greenspan just came out yesterday and said what's happening in Venezuela is going to happen next in the U.S. And that's actually exactly what I said last week. Wow. So it's starting to freak me out that these guys, Soros and Greenspan, are all starting to say the things that I'm saying. But they should know, because they actually are more tied into this network of what's actually going on. So they know it's going to happen because they've been a part of a group that has been making it happen, and the plan is to make it happen and make things so bad that people clamor for a one world government. And so they know it's going to happen, but now they're actually doing the same things that I'm doing, which is actually very concerning. So you pointed out BitGold. George Soros is investing in it, and George Soros is now big into gold. And I'm like, oh, it feels so creepy to be doing the same things as him, but I'm doing them because I know that this is going to happen, because I've done decades of research on this. He's doing it because he knows knows it's going to happen because he's actually been making it happen. It's actually a plan they want to do.
Right.
So now we're both doing the same things, and it's kind of creepy. But yeah, no, this is going to be really crazy bad. People need to wake up. There's not much time left to wake up. People, for whatever reason, just don't want to think that there might be these people who have very sinister intentions controlling the world. But if you even just look into it, spend a couple of hours on YouTube and do a little bit of research, that is actually the case. And the sooner that we can wake up to it and realize it, the more that we can actually affect change and get rid of these systems and these people. But if we just avoid it, and if everyone just doesn't want to look at it until it's too late, we're all going to have to go through very hard times together. And maybe that's why you called your show what you did, Jay.
Turning hard times into good times. We want to try to do that. But, you mentioned the Internet. A lot of people, especially older folks, are leery of getting too much information from the Internet. But I would say if that bothers you, there's a lot of other great sources, too. We've had, of course, G. Edward Griffin on this show, the very first show we ran back in 2009. The Creature from Jekyll Island, his book that is extremely well documented, telling you who really owns America, who owns the Anglo-American Empire, which is now trying to take over China and Russia and the rest of the world, as Jeff points out, the one world government. William Engdahl, who's on this show frequently, wrote The Gods of Money. If you really want to look at the American history, all the way back to the time that the British were kicked out of the United States, the bankers out of London started doing everything in their power to sneak back into control. And now I believe, Jeff, that they have basically gotten control again with the Rothschilds behind the Bank of England, the Rockefellers and various other family institutions that have so much control of the Federal Reserve and the banking system in the United States. So we don't see anything of these people anymore. They're basically out of sight, but the wealth is there and in the family interest and continuing to hold on. And they control the dialogue to a great extent, Jeff. They have a lot of these think tanks. Most of these think tanks, they have one way or another, they have control of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, that is really touches the royalty of Europe, essentially, and the royalty, the nouveau riche well, not the nouveau riche, but the old wealth of America. And going back even, and Daniel Estlin told us here, back into the Venetian days, actually. Some of them extend back that far. So it's very fascinating, of course. The guys that do the bad things don't want the lights turned on them. And Jeff, I think that's what you're trying to do, as we do to a certain extent on this show, to try to enlighten people as to what is really going on as opposed to what the propagandists are telling us is happening. And you're going off to the Bilderbergs, going to get as close as you can to as many of these sinister characters as possible. What is your purpose then for going there? I suppose just to enlighten us, right? To help us to understand as much as possible what's actually happening.
Well, actually, I have no real purpose in going except for I feel drawn to go there. I feel like there's something I need to do, and I did that last year. But before I get into that, I just want to bring up, you brought up how some older people feel like leery of getting their information from the Internet. They should feel leery of getting their information from the television program.
Oh, my goodness, absolutely right.
Reason. They are brainwashed. It's sort of funny when I hear that.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. But at the same time, Jeff, some of us older guys, and that would be me, not you, I like to have a hard copy that I can underline and write on and look at the footnotes and stuff. You can do all that on the Internet, too. Of course, but it's, my sense is that a lot of times, this is going to sound like your grandpa, probably. Kids today read headlines. Do they go deeper? Well, I know people that read your stuff go deeper for sure, and you do, so I commend you for that. You just, in terms of, maybe you wanted, I interrupted you and your thoughts there in terms of going off to Germany for the Bilderbergs.
Yeah, well, I think you make a good point about how things are today, though, too, in that people have a very short attention span because there's so much information now. We're just bombarded with information. So all I really try to do is try to keep my things short. I try not to do long videos. I try not to do long articles. Just try to get people this information in a format that they can use and can go into. But you'd be surprised how many people really look into things. There's so many people that'll just hear about something on your show or on my website, and then they'll go to Wikipedia, and then they'll spend all day looking into all this stuff. So there's a lot of people doing that. So there is a lot of hope that way. And as far as go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Joe.
As far as Bilderberg, I have no real plan. I went last year with Luca Radowski of We Are Change, who's amazing, one of the best independent journalists in the world, and Dan Dix of Press for Truth, also excellent journalist. And this is actually Dan's 10th Bilderberg, and I went with them last year. I was just curious, just to see what was really going on, and it was really quite shocking. The security, the amount of secrecy around it. We were actually at the G7 in Munich, Germany, and that was like a Hunger Games party in the Capitol party for the press. There was thousands of press from around the world. They had $10,000 bottles of champagne that they were pouring like water for the press. The press would only run off every now and then to take a picture of Angela Merkel drinking a beer or things like that, like no real journalism. And just down the road, right after the G7, 2 days later was the Bilderberg meeting in Austria. And we asked all the media if they knew about Bilderberg. No one had heard of it. No one seemed to care. And then we went to the meeting in Austria at the Bilderberg meeting, and we went into the hotel. We were the only people to actually get in after they already locked it down. I somehow talked my way past all the security, and there was lots and lots of armed security there. I guess I just gave off that I was one of the Bilderberg people or something. I was wearing, nice clothes and everything, and actually had my G7 badge on. I think that's what really helped us. And we got into the hotel, and the White House press corps was there, and we were shocked. We were like, the White House press corps is going to cover Bilderberg? And we asked them about it, and they had never heard of Bilderberg. And we said, well, it starts tomorrow, right? And they're like, what is it? And we told them, and they said, no, we're just here for the G7. They put us in this hotel. They fly us in on helicopters to take pictures of Barack Obama, and then we come back, and we're leaving tomorrow. And we said, well, you should stay because this is where all the decisions get decided. This is where everything happens. The G7 is just a big photo op. And these are the top White House press corps people. They told us that, they said, this is their words, we're not real journalists. We're just actors. You guys are the real journalists. We get a paycheck. We don't even want to know what's going on because we don't want to lose our jobs. Right. And that's what they told us. So that's what's going on. So I'm going back this year just to see what happens this year. It's unbelievable what's going on.
Well, there you just nailed it. You just said why people shouldn't pay any attention watching television, getting their news from television. Here's an admission from the White House press corps that they're not journalists. They're just really paid television personalities is all they really are. It's incredible. Jeff, anything else you might want to add? Anything else that you may be writing that people should be watching out for?
I would just say just go to dollarvigilante.com. If you just put your email in on the front page, we'll send you. I write an article almost every day. I've devoted myself to covering this crisis until the very end. It's all I do right now, and I write articles every day. Check that out. If you want more information, we have a paid newsletter. It's just a few dollars a month, and we actually give advice, analysis, recommendations, and we've actually just done phenomenally well in the last year. We're talking thousands of % returns on a regular basis because we know what's going on. So we're ahead of the game. So we bought Bitcoin, we bought gold and silver, we bought precious metal stocks, which did phenomenally well in the first quarter of this year. And so you can get that at the newsletter. And if you're interested in the whole Jubilee Shemitah sort of angle on things, just go to surviveshemitah.com. That's survive, SHEMITAH.com. And we have our videos there where we talk about what we think is planned, what has been planned, what's going on, and what's yet to come in this Jubilee year, which ends in October of this year.
Well, I want to thank you very much for all you do, Jeff. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks for spending the time with us. We wish you safety and success in helping the world understand who these tyrants are, the guys that are behind the throne that pose as saviors of the world. Well, God's blessings to you and your friends who travel with you, Jeff, and I hope we can catch up with you after your return from Germany, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay, and same to you. Keep up the great work. Really appreciate everything you do as well.
Thank you so much, Jeff.